Dear Rector and Chairman of the Board, Your Excellencies, dear fellow honorees, proximi and proximi, colleagues and distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure and privilege to say a few words of thanks on behalf of all today's honorees, though it's hard to capture this wonderful, uplifting spirit of this morning. All of us are deeply touched by the warm reception by our dear colleagues here in Brussels and this precious recognition of our efforts, our struggles, and sometimes successes. But more importantly, we thank you for honoring the struggles and successes of science and scholarship and art itself, this wonderful ability of human civilization to measure, understand, improve, and also illuminate the world. What is the state of science? Leonid Brezhnev was once asked to assess the state of the Soviet Union in a single word. His answer was good. When he then was asked what the answer would be if he could use two words, he said, not good. In a single word, the state of science is good. I would say the best ever. And next year it will be even better, because knowledge always expands. It's the only natural resource that increases when used. New ideas, experiments, data and technologies are opening up exciting research areas and promising major breakthroughs. There's an unprecedented worldwide pool of talent, also from regions and social strata that have not been previously engaged. And modern communication technologies enable new levels of connectivity and collaboration, building for the first time a truly global research community. Simply put, we are moving to the next level. The previous century can be characterized as the search of the building blocks of reality, the particles that constitute matter, the genes that make life possible, the bits that form information. This century will explore the brave new world that can be constructed with these building blocks in our labs and in our minds. This acceleration of knowledge leads to what I would like to call the knowledge paradox. On the one hand, all these new insights make science even more useful and relevant. Personalized medicine can be found in our bodies. Personalized apps on our smartphones. There's hardly a policy issue that does not crucially depend on scientific data and analysis, from climate change to financial regulation, from the spread of infectious diseases to internet privacy. But on the other hand, as science digs ever deeper into layers of greater complexity, it becomes more and more difficult to understand and less visible to the public. It's hidden behind the closed doors of universities and secret industrial labs, and behind the high paywalls of academic journals. And with this growing gap between impact and understanding, there's a real risk that science will become all-powerful and pervasive, governing every detail of our lives, yet paradoxically also invisible, ill-understood, and perhaps finally ignored. So in two words, the state of science is not good. Increasingly, we see attacks on the integrity of the research enterprise. The rector already mentioned this. Academic freedom, even the scientific method and scholarship itself, are threatened in many parts of the world. Peer-reviewed studies are often set aside as just another opinion. I experience this every day on the other side of the Atlantic, where the government has no qualms about reversing legislation on the environment, proposing draconian cuts to research budgets, and closing borders to knowledge immigrants. There's a worldwide surge of fake news and alternative facts, and many feel encouraged to deny the validity of climate change, vaccinations, evolution theory, and even basic logic. The British minister and Brexiteer Michael Gove famously said, "I think the people in this country have had enough of experts." And we see the result every day on television. In the Netherlands, a popular politician recently claimed that universities undermine society. My answer is yes, universities do undermine, namely preconceived ideas and dogmatic thinking. Fortunately, we also see the immune system at work. Many scholars and institutions and artists choose to fight back. And perhaps this stress test of the Enlightenment is the wake-up call that the world seems to require periodically. After all, as our medical colleagues can explain us much better, in the wake of an infection, the immune system generates a reservoir of antibodies that can help future attacks prevent. And one of the duties of universities is to immunize society against sloppy thinking and short-term interests of politics and business. Many of you here love mathematics, and it's wonderful to see mathematics in such a colorful light. But the world is not only captured in numbers and equations. It's also captured in ideas, in books, in metaphors, and powerful images, reflecting the diversity of humankind and all our interests. That's why science is an enterprise of the people and by the people, but also for the people. As scholars, we live a privileged life, and it's appropriate for us to inform, engage, and thank society in return. Such a broad-ranging dialogue is not only necessary for future funding or attracting young minds, it's also fertile ground for innovation and economic growth. And well-informed, science-literate citizens are better able to make responsible choices when they are confronted with wicked problems such as nuclear power, genetically modified food, or artificial intelligence. Similarly, scientists need the dialogue with society to act responsibly in developing potentially harmful technologies. But I think there's even a higher goal for public engagement of science. Society fundamentally benefits from embracing the scientific culture of accuracy, truth-seeking, critical questioning, healthy skepticism, and respect both for facts and uncertainties. If you could only spend a small fraction of the intellectual and financial resources we invest in research, in exploring new and effective new forms of communications, we might close this knowledge gap much sooner. In any case, we should start with the public in mind. There's a famous, and it's undoubtedly apocryphal story, in which a team of anthropologists showed a movie of New York City to an indigenous tribe, deep in the jungle. So images of skyscrapers and trains and cars and tunnels and bridges flash by. Afterwards, the audience is asked, what did they see? The answer, a chicken. Indeed, on closer examination, for a brief moment, a chicken crossed the screen, the only thing they recognized. In science communications, we see a lot of these chickens in New York. At the same time, we should not hesitate to paint the big picture. I was once asked to perform an experiment on a television show. I filled the balloon with water, you can all do this at home, and then held a lighter under it, trying to burn a hole in the balloon. For greater effect, I did this above another guest's head, add some tension. Of course, nothing happened. As I tried to explain, the heat capacity of water is simply too high. If you put an empty kettle on the stove, it easily becomes very hot. Do you fill it with water? It takes a long time to warm up. I thought I demonstrated some useful basic physics to a general audience. However, the next morning, I got an email from a very, very distinguished colleague. He liked the experiment, but Robert, did you understand that your explanation was completely wrong? His point was, I didn't show the experiment to demonstrate the concept of specific heat, but something much, much, much more important, the fact that you can trust science. The experiment never fails because there's a law of nature that forbids burning a hole in a water-filled balloon, a law upheld with absolute certainty. His point was clear. Even if science grows more complex, we can still explain its basic principles. If this current emotional reaction to the cold logic of research and the ideals of the Enlightenment teaches us one thing, is that the role of science goes far beyond new technology. We are more than technocrats, working in the dark engine rooms of society, repairing machinery or fine-tuning policy. We are explorers on the greatest adventure of history, charting new worlds, improving the lives of all, and bringing deeper layers of understanding. We must share the emotions of this adventure with everyone, the excitement, the awe, the wonder, at the endless richness of nature and the human mind. This very, very special recognition, if it does one thing, I think it is to encourage all of us to continue on that journey. In particular, honoring, I must say, the wonderful legacy of Hans Rosling, whose wisdom is so dearly missed. Today's celebration illuminates, for me, the core values of science that are essential to a full-fledged, resilient society. Like the arts, unfettered scholarships uplifts the spirits. It heightens our perspective above the everyday, and it shows us a new way to look at the familiar. It literally changes our lives. I often like to quote the poet Robert Louis Stevenson. The world is so full of a number of things, I'm sure we should all be as happy as kings. As a scientist and as a scholar and as an artist, you feel that joy every day. But I think today, even more so, as I'm sure do all my fellow honorees. So thank you on behalf of all of us, Vrije Universiteit Brussel.